Established in 1994 by the government of the Bahamas, Parliamentary Channel 40 broadcasts gavel-to-gavel coverage of the proceedings of both houses of Parliament, providing up-to-date information, including live interviews and historical data on the workings of one of the most important branches of government. Good morning, I'm Anthony Newbold. Welcome to the Parliamentary Channel's live coverage of the House of Assembly. Today, debate continues. The 2013-2014 budget. The member for Yamacraw, the Minister of Social Services, Melanie Griffin, expected to begin this morning when the session starts. Last night, quite a number of presenters, and of course, the Speaker had to suspend the session for 10 minutes last night. The member for Montague and Long Island and Farm Road and West Grand Bahama, a lot of them in exchanges that caused the Speaker to stop the proceedings for a while. Well, we're not going to quite get to that this morning, but we will give you some of what the member for Montague had to say. Before all of that happened, he decided to address the issue of crime. Also speaking last night was the member for Angliston, the Minister of Transport and Aviation, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin. We're going to hear from the two of them this morning. Let's begin with the member for Montague, Richard Lightburn.
Member for Montague, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the Montague constituency, and I offer them thanks each time for electing me to be their representative. Now, Mr. Speaker, there are so many issues which are facing this country today that you must ponder where do we start in trying to resolve some of the problems. We do, however, need a commitment from a strong government to determine the country's priorities. And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, from my viewpoint and that of many of our citizens, the government cannot see the wood from the trees. Indeed, what are their priorities? You see, Mr. Speaker, the government came to power on a wave of promises. The aim was to get into power by whatever means possible. Promise the world, and the people will, in their desire to see an improvement in their lot, buy most of them. Sure, we had heard them promise that they would be ready to govern from day one. And there was also this 100-day smorgasbord of treats, some of significance, but most required nothing more than the stroke of a pen. We will resolve the economic problems of this country, they indicated, and we will provide 10,000 jobs in our first year. The majority of the country, Mr. Speaker, is, to put it mildly, very disappointed with this government's performance to date. And one can understand why. Now, if they don't believe that, they just need to go outside of this house and talk to the people and answer their cell phones, and they will find out that this country is very disappointed. Crime is headed through the roof, and the government has the audacity to again promise 10,000 jobs. What happened to the first 10,000? I don't know where that promise remains. I heard the Prime Minister recently talk about 10,000 again. Now, I don't know whether he was referring to the first 10 or whether this was meant to be an additional 10. Instead of attempting to hoodwink the public, by suggesting that unemployment is down 1 point here and another point there, it would be interesting to know how many of those 10,000 jobs that they promised have in fact been provided during the first 12 months of this government. And incidentally, Mr. Speaker, you're not creating a job by refusing to continue
Thank you very much.
Do it again?
Address the chair, Montague.
Glad to see you're remaining to hear this. You're not creating a job, Mr. Speaker, by refusing to renew the contract of an FNM supporter and replacing him with a PLP supporter and saying, oh, that's one job. How many actual jobs were created in this first year? I've heard no attempt to try and even suggest how many. I dare say it can't be more than 1,000.
If that.
That would be an exaggeration.
If that.
The manner in which several of the government's prior speakers are patting themselves on the back makes one wonder where they're living.
Yeah, where they living? In their ivory towers,
They're not living in this country. They don't go outside of these walls to find out what is happening in this country. They don't pick up a newspaper. They don't listen on the radio. Every morning, Mr. Speaker, I am concerned when I listen to the news. I wonder to myself, what mayhem has occurred overnight? How many people have been killed last night? What negative headlines will I see in the newspapers when I open them? This government is fiddling while Rome burns. Government is seeking to pat itself on the back for what they perceive are accomplishments during their first year, when they really, in fact, should be kicking themselves in the posterior for failing to deal with more pressing issues.
I like that.
Crime being just one of them, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Montague are nervous. I don't suggest they're any more nervous than the constituents in other constituencies. They're nervous to go out of their homes in the day. They're nervous because they're concerned that they may have someone approach them and snatch their handbag or rip some jewelry that they're wearing off their neck. Nervous that they'll come home to find that their house has been ransacked. Nervous that their car has been stolen. Wake up in the morning and find it gone. Or find it sitting on 4 blocks and every tire gone. And especially nervous, Mr. Speaker, that someone may, in the course of the night, break into their house and not only rob them, but assault them. That is the concern and the fear of this country. And yet, members opposite seem to carry on as if crime was not a problem in this country. Residents of Kemp Road want to leave the area. Montague residents who can afford it would like to move into a gated community.
Some say they're moving up on Eastern Road by Dodge Road. They know it's safe
Which
here.
is perceived as safe.
Right up there.
And in some case, residents have expressed a desire even to leave this country. You're getting young people who are going abroad, getting educated. They don't want to return home. They don't want to come back here. What do they have to come for? They can't go out at night because they're going to be concerned that somebody's going to rob them or shoot them. Our neighborhoods are being destroyed, and this government continues to fiddle while Nassau burns.
Yes. Speak, Richard.
I made a call to this Parliament some weeks ago for the need to have a joint approach to the crime issue. And while my suggestion wasn't novel, I'm not claiming any particular credit for it, but I would have thought that I would not have to suggest to government the need for such an approach. Parliament must take the lead in this matter. And if the people have any faith in us, they will follow. Perhaps they don't have faith in us, and that's perhaps why this government is ignoring it. Everyone who has the best interest of this country at heart needs to participate. Because it's not only something that we can solve in here, we have to instill in the public the need and the desire to do this together. But if a government continues to sit on its posterior and like an ostrich stick its head in the sand, our country will continue to deteriorate, and when you finally decide to pull your head out of the sand, it will be too late. There'll be no tourist economy.
Ostriches have
There'll be
long
no
necks,
foreign investors.
so they could do that.
There'll be no
can do that
local
very
businesses if the criminals are allowed to threaten and undermine the feeling of safety and security in this country. The golden goose will have flown, and who knows if it'll ever return. So far, there's been no attempt that I am aware of to analyze the root cause of crime. And while the government has in its budget made provision for more police officers on the street and giving them more cars to carry out their duties, this only scratches the surface, as this only deals with the results, not the root cause of crime. And the root cause is what government needs to focus its attention on. I dare say that jobs, or a lack thereof, are a major component of the problem. Perhaps several members of government feel secure, surrounded by police officers and toting their own hardware.
Yeah.
But this is little comfort to the rest of us. Personally, I'm tired of seeing the pain in the eyes of persons in Montague constituency whose loved ones have been gunned down. It is small comfort to them that the perpetrator appears to have come from some other constituency. But this does not help their grief. I call on the government to wake up and deal with the real issues facing this country.
Yeah.
Everyone born in this world has, in my view, a purpose in life, Mr. Speaker. And that is the hardest thing, though, to discover. The other day I attended a funeral of a young man gunned down in the Montague constituency. Someone who was too young to have determined what his purpose in life was. It was my wish that if nothing less, his purpose would be found in his death, in that it would prove to be the clarion call to our communities to take stock of what happened to him and do their utmost to ensure that no one else in their community would suffer that pain. Mr. Speaker, I would like to impress upon the honorable members of this House that we are in the middle of a national crisis. The crime situation in this country, and in particular New Providence, is out of control and has, over the last several weeks, escalated to a most serious level. Bahamians in all residential and business areas do not feel safe, and we must act now. Every minute of every hour that we sit here is being wasted. We cannot delay. We need to work night and day, if necessary, to put in place the appropriate measures to restore the public's confidence. This is a matter which can no longer be delayed. We must put aside our political differences to deal with this issue, as we're all Bahamians and have been charged with a mandate to govern this country, even if we are on this side, Mr. Speaker.
And they on that side.
This is, in reality, in my view, a state of emergency. And so I am asking all the members of this House to collaborate and to brainstorm in an emergency sitting, if necessary, to table, pass, and implement emergency national security and safety measures which in some way may address this crisis.
Yes.
I'm asking this government to ensure that there is adequate provision in this budget to pledge the necessary resources to facilitate what is required to restore the public's confidence. I appreciate that the issues underlying the criminal activity in this country are many and are affected by a multitude of social and economic conditions. But the senseless murders and the reprehensible violence cannot go unchecked without an urgent response by the police force. And as I indicated, I do not know how I can more strenuously emphasize that we cannot delay further. I do not want to cite to you statistics, and I do not at this time want to engage in a debate on the cause of crime in this country. But it is not, in my view, an understatement to say that we are under siege.
Yeah.
What we are trying to accomplish as custodians of the obligations to govern this country is in grave jeopardy. Again, Mr. Speaker, I do not have all the solutions, but I am certain that with the collaboration of the members of this House, we can implement on an urgent basis measures which will speak loudly to those who are engaging in crime.
Yeah.
That the government of the Bahamas has as its primary focus to bring to an end this antisocial and nefarious conduct. We must start with patrols with all available resources and in every neighborhood so that citizens can see the law enforcement officers in their communities.
That was the Member of Parliament for Montague, Richard Lightburn, presenting last night during the debate on the 2013-2014 budget. We are live, of course, here in Parliament Square on a rainy Wednesday morning. We expect that members will begin shortly. Later in his contribution, as you must have heard by now, the Speaker had occasion to suspend proceedings, giving members a tongue lashing for bad behavior. But also presenting last night, as I said to you, was the member for Angliston, the Honorable Glenys Hannah Martin. She began her presentation by addressing the issue of crime and comments by the Montague MP. Here's Mrs. Martin. Well, we're going to have Mrs. Hannah Martin in a minute. As I said, she began her presentation by addressing comments made by the Montague MP as she got into her presentation about the various departments under her purview. I want to also remind you, so that you can remind others, those of you watching, that we will be joined by Radio 1540, the National Voice, at 10 o'clock. Also Radio 810 in Grand Bahama and 104.5. We are also streaming livestream.com/ZNS Bahamas. And now, Mrs. Hannah Martin, we're preparing Mrs. Hannah Martin for you from last night. Again, as I said, she began by addressing issues raised by Mr. Lightburn and pointing out really that we're not really a lawless people. They're just small segments of the community who are causing all of us to suffer. And she asked people to check what they were doing. Here's Mrs. Hannah Martin from last night.
How we got here. In this country, Mr. Speaker, we experience the ravages of a terrible economic meltdown, which has had devastating effects on many of our people, and in particular upon the most vulnerable amongst us, the elderly, the impoverished, and children. But in truth, most of us have been negatively impacted in one way or another during this economic drought. When the story is told in its fullness, it will no doubt be one of incredible suffering and hardship for many people, and the loss of many cherished possessions, such as our homes, which we fought hard to acquire, a private education which we were proud to provide for our children, the privilege of job security, numerous quality of life issues such as ease of access to food and luxury of a peace of mind, and much more. All these things, Mr. Speaker, came in question over the last several years. Many will recall the psychological stresses and strains suffered by people, sometimes impacting physical health, strokes, heart attacks, and brought on by the worries and challenges of these economic woes. And Mr. Speaker, I tried to avoid, in my older age in this House, to get down in this political finger-pointing that the member spoke of, the blame game he spoke of. But in fact, the member from Montague, in my humble opinion, superbly engaged in a blame game at its fullest manifestation. And what we have, and I agree with him that crime is a serious issue. But I am reminded that when he speaks about the problem of crime in this country, we have to bear in mind that we inherited a wild horse called crime, running wildly down the road in this country. Our task now is to bring it under control. We didn't take office and then all of a sudden we had a serious issue of social discord in our country. This is a continuing issue. In fact, speaking with the member for Bain and Grandstand, I am reminded that in 2011, that this country reached a peak in terms of murder in this country. That was while we were sitting over there in opposition. So we understand crime is an issue and we're all concerned about it. But we don't want the issue distorted. Because in truth, Mr. Speaker, we have to remember the Bahamian people are not stupid. They are a very astute population and they understand that this is a continuing dilemma. And this is why people are so concerned, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, in the midst of this economic maelstrom, our country has also seen this terrible disruption to our public peace and an increase in deadly violence and crime in general. Speaker, and the member from Montague spoke about a situation, I think that it's the same issue that touches me very deeply also. And it gave me a poignant sense of sadness. I went to a particular food store last week, Saturday, which I frequent, and I saw some of the packing boys walking through an aisle wearing T-shirts with a photo of one of the other packing boys who had attended to me before, and who I always found to be respectful and helpful and well-trained. And I inquired as to why they were wearing his picture on their shirt. And they shared with me his obituary. And, Mr. Speaker, this brought home for me the reality that this young man had vacated the planet. And my heart sank, because at the age of 17 years, he had been struck down by bullets, apparently fired indiscriminately into a yard. He was one of 2 murder victims in that incident, a student at R.M. Bailey, and due to graduate in the next few days. Mr. Speaker, the faces of his young co-workers were something that I can't explain. To say it was shock and disbelief and sadness are just words. Mr. Speaker, it's what I saw in the face of these young men. Speaker, this terrible true life incident of this young boy for me brought home the full and utter tragedy of violence in our country today. Speaker, but we have to be fair to the issue, Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, this is the negative circumstances we have faced in the last few years, this economic tornado that has left devastation in its wake, suffering of our people, and a seemingly unrelenting wave of violence have created the conditions for what might be called the perfect storm in our country. This is what has come together, Mr. Speaker. And this may be a simplistic summary of what has transpired in the last few years in the lives of our people. But I am seeking to illustrate, Mr. Speaker, the utter hardship and turbulence our country has seen. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that despite that, there are still signs of alleviation and recovery happening in this country. And the objective of this budget is to give momentum to these early signs, while at the same time stabilizing what has become a delicate situation as it relates to our national debt. Speaker, this is a delicate balance. Not only did we inherit the wild horse of violence in this country, we inherited significant debt, significant national debt. Speaker, the wild horse of debt. Or some may say the wild donkey of death, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, on the issue of crime and violence, Speaker, this is a matter which is dominating the national conversation, and one which is in all of our minds, and for good reason. Speaker, surely we must all now consider, and I think the member for Montague agrees with that, our present state of affairs as a wake-up call for all of us as citizens, Speaker. And I want to say, I disagree with the member for Montague when he says we are a lawless society. I don't accept that. But I would say, though, that we should not relinquish our country to a handful of aimless, lawless, careless individuals who are wreaking havoc on our national psyche and leaving us trembling and cowering in fear, and so many people dissolved in tremendous pain. We have to be clear and courageous in our assertion of ownership of this, our beloved Bahama land. Speaker, this is our responsibility to ourselves, to our children, and to children who have not yet come. Indeed, even to those who came before us, who fought so hard to build this country, Speaker. Now is the time, in the middle of our troubles, for Bahamians to step forward and begin to purposely demonstrate in our homes, in the workplace, on our streets, the highest levels of discipline and ethics, hard work and common courtesy, and yes, Mr. Speaker, even love for one another. Speaker, there was a time in our country when love was in large supply to overflow, and we shared it generously. It did not make us weak. This made us a better people and helped us to identify who we were. Sometimes you get the feeling, Mr. Speaker, that it is now a dirty word in some quarters. Mr. Speaker, the state, the government, will do its part as it must. And it is an approach, as you would have heard, and I say its part in terms of addressing this issue of crime. And I want to say to the member of Montague, and I'm not continuously singling him out, but you raised, huh? So what? No, no, I just wanted, this point you raised about getting to the root of crime. I think that the approach of this government, as distinguished from the prior administration, has a multifaceted approach to the issue of crime. You see it in the initiatives of the urban renewal teams on the ground every day. Now, you may have your judgments about it, but they're on the ground every day, knocking on doors, visiting the businesses, dealing with young people in the communities. They're on the ground, Mr. Speaker.
Right.
You find also this budget deals with better equipped police officers. You heard about the issue of filling in the gaps in the delivery of education to our children, children with special needs, Mr. Speaker. You're going to hear when the member for Yamacross speaks about better access to social services assistance and other like initiatives. So this approach is multifaceted. It is not just with the police force, but it includes the police force, as the member for Seabury spoke about the resources given. But it is a much broader approach. But the issue is a serious one, and as was pointed out, it did not happen overnight, and it's become somewhat entrenched, Speaker. I'm also very pleased that the member for Fox Hill, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, executed on behalf of our country the Small Arms Treaty.
Yep.
I believe this is a truly significant initiative. This new collaboration with the United States of America, one of the largest manufacturers in the world of firearms, should effectively assist in the interdiction of illegal weapons at their borders before they are dispatched to countries such as ours and into the hands of individuals who, with their use, strike terror in the heart of communities. And, Mr. Speaker, we must wipe out the disgusting corruption, wherever it may be, and whoever perpetuates or perpetrates such an evil, which facilitates guns entering in our country to destabilize our nation and to cause bloodshed. And if they're Bahamians, they're doing it to their own people in their own country, Mr. Speaker. It's disgusting. And, Mr. Speaker, it's also very important, as simplistic as it may sound, that we do not lose sight of a very compelling fact, and that is that the Bahamas is a great country with a beautiful people. In the middle of all our troubles, we may begin to doubt that, which we've always come to believe. We always believe that about ourselves. But we got to be careful, Mr. Speaker. This must, however, be our unrelenting theme going forward. We must not allow the challenges we face to overtake us, but must face the challenges square in the face. The truth must drive us forward as we focus in restoring the Bahamas to its rightful place, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is because of our recent collective ordeal and our ongoing challenges and my conviction that we are a great country with a hopeful future that in my public service I am imbued with a sense of urgency. I am compelled to move quickly to redress where I can outstanding problems. The Ministry of Transport of Aviation, we're moving steadily to implement enhanced standards so that there are no gray areas in how the Bahamas is perceived in our standards of safety and security or any aspect of essential operations. We are moving expeditiously to assure the efficient and timely delivery of services and the conduct of smooth operations. We move in a considered way to introduce new innovations and to facilitate new opportunities for young Bahamians. And I hope to illustrate these things shortly, Mr. Speaker. We are finding new avenues to enhance revenue streams and to improve upon methods of collection of revenue, and so far as possible to introduce cost recovery initiatives so as to reduce the burden upon the public purse. Mr. Speaker, in the interest of efficiency of time in this presentation, I will speak to all areas of this ministry collectively under the following headings. 1, standards. 2, revenue streams. 3, training and human resource development. 4, infrastructural improvement. And 5, new infrastructural initiatives. Speak on the issue of standards. If we are to move our country forward, we must provide the highest of standards in all areas of activity. This applies to everything. Our tourism product, the quality of education in our schools, in the level of service given to the public in the public service, in the quality of medical care given to those who require that care. In all things, we should as a nation commit to promoting and producing the highest of standards in all things. We should never be a nation depicted as mediocre or some negative or demeaning stereotype. This has never been our legacy, Mr. Speaker. In the region and in the world, the Bahamas must distinguish itself as an outstanding nation. We are reminded that our national anthem declares, and I quote, "See how the world marks the manner of your bearing." We are a shining people, Mr. Speaker. I don't care what they say in here. And so, Mr. Speaker, the question of standards is an important issue in my ministerial mandate. It's important to issues of safety, to issues of security, and in particular, security at ports of entry. It is important to the efficiency and quality of public services for our population. It is important that to the perceived notions held by others about our country. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, implementing the highest of standards on a sustained basis protects our economy and powerfully positions the Bahamas to effectively compete with other nations in what is becoming a highly competitive environment. We must therefore, Mr. Speaker, implement and sustain the highest standards in the public service and everywhere and in everything throughout this country. Speaker, the Bahamas is a member of several critical international bodies, most of which are branches of the United Nations. In all matters relative to the aviation sector, the relevant body is the International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO. In maritime matters, it is the International Maritime Organization, the IMO. In matters affecting the postal system, it is the Universal Postal Union, the UPU. And in meteorology, it is the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO. Speaker, practically every nation-state in the world is a member of each of these organizations. These bodies, through collective interaction, mandate standards and practices for implementation in each member state relative to the respective areas of focus. And each member state, in turn, agrees to comply with those mandates. These standards and practices are designed and intended to improve the quality of the critical services provided and to enhance safety and security in the delivery of these services throughout the world, such that you will have uniformity worldwide and that no nation state is a weak link in the chain of nations. Speaker, states are also audited periodically to measure and test compliance with these mandates. The Bahamas has been audited by both the ICAO and the IMO in recent times. The ICAO audited the Bahamas in 2009, which included a comprehensive review of our aviation sector, including airports, security, our regulatory oversight of safety, and our laws and regulations. ICAO then did a follow-up to the 2009 audit in 2011. The IMO audited the Bahamas in 2011, and this audit included a review of our national maritime administration, including our laws and regulatory oversight impacting safety of maritime activity in the Bahamas and maritime security. So, Speaker, to be quite frank and very brief, in each case, the two ICAO audits in 2009 and 2011 respectively, and the IMO audit in 2011, the Bahamas was found wanting, and in some instances, seriously wanting. And Mr. Speaker, the results of these audits are published for the world to see, including the commercial carriers by air and sea that do business in the Bahamas. To more fully understand, Mr. Speaker, in a practical way, the importance of standards and the direct links to our economy, it was in fact an FAA audit in the year 2000 that led to a downgrade of the Bahamas from a Category 1 airport destination to a Category 2 airport destination. That downgrade negatively impacted our economy because it affected the size and type of aircraft that could land in the Bahamas, and potentially negatively impacted the reputation of the Bahamas, because it implies you do not have a proper safety oversight of aircraft. And it was the 2009 audit conducted by ICAO which again caught the attention of the FAA and led to their recent audit a few weeks ago of our safety oversight regime, which I have spoken to this Parliament about already. That audit has now been completed, and I will speak to it, Mr. Speaker, once we have the written report from the FAA in hand. We have, however, received a verbal report, and what I will say now is that it is incumbent upon me to thank the very hard-working and dedicated members of the Civil Aviation Department who went into overdrive in preparation for this audit. Yeah. Speaker, Speaker, it's important to note, however, that the Bahamas will again be audited by the ICAO in October, this time in respect of our airports and air navigation services. And much work is being undertaken as we speak to ensure there are no gaps, unlike our position in 2009 and 2011. Speaker, and I don't want to get political, but those two dates were under the prior administration. I only do that because when you hear some of the political slant that comes from the other side about the fact that we are incompetent, incapable, can't do nothing, hopeless and helpless, need to sit under a tree and drink some coconut water. You know, it's very embarrassing because it really is the height of arrogance. Because what they're saying is that they are great and they are the only ones in this country who are capable of manifestations, Mr. Speaker.
Well, ain't nobody remember who the Minister of Aviation was?
We remember it because we know what the neglect was.
You remember?
Speaker, it is therefore very clear that it is very important that we implement the highest standards of safety and security and implement operational efficiency in these critical sectors, and that we have a system of quality assurance to continuously test the levels of these standards. So, Mr. Speaker, the matter of standards, a somewhat abstract and largely intangible thing, is nevertheless of utmost importance to us, both domestically and internationally. It is critical to our quality of life and our national economic well-being. And we saw that in those audits. We saw it in the downgrades and the impact on our economy. In the aviation sector, in accord with international mandates, We have recently passed legislation in this House to create definitive structures for aviation security, and most recently regulations were promulgated for safety oversight in the aviation sector. Again, recently legislation was passed to regulate aerodromes in our country. East Grand Bahama, let your partner know, aerodromes were included in the last regulations that were laid. Are you okay? Well, I'm glad he's listening. Additionally, personnel have been recruited and are to be trained to conduct oversight and to diligently ensure the implementation of these rules and laws. Mr. Speaker, in the maritime sector, a workshop, the first of its kind, was sponsored by the IMO and held in Freeport, Grand Bahama, a couple months ago, to begin a formal response to the IMO audit that I previously referred to, where they found us wanting. Each relevant agency is now tasked with appropriately responding by the implementation of the necessary practices or regulations. Speaker, in an effort to enhance standards on mailboats and other small cargo vessels in this country, draft legislation, a small cargo vessel code, has been prepared, which was the basis of consultation with the industry. A workshop was held several months ago, sponsored by the Port Department, with mailboat owners and other stakeholders to review the draft and offer comments and recommendations. A final draft has now been completed, and a bill will be brought to this House very shortly. The enactment of its provisions will create a comprehensive code affecting a wide range of issues, most significantly the inspection of vessels and the requirements related to manning, dry docking, emergency drills, accident reporting, environmental policies, and record keeping. The current inspection process does not take into consideration these wide-ranging and fundamental issues relative to vessels being declared fit. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the water sports industry, you will recall that legislation was introduced to this House and passed to regulate the industry. The challenge has always been and continues to be enforcement of these regulations. The Port Department is poised to engage in dialogue with franchise owners in the first instance and their employees thereafter, so as to create a partnership between the regulator and the users, so that there is a clear understanding of the ministry's expectations on issues such as code of conduct, rotation, continuous training, and standards of safety. We will additionally sponsor mandatory training initiatives as a companion to this partnership. My ministry will be engaging very shortly a cadre of enforcement officers to govern and control activities on our beaches. I'm also advised that the Port Authority Board has taken a no-tolerance stance on violations which impact safety on our beaches. Speaker, you will see the ministry's heightened involvement in other areas promoting safety, a culture of safety in maritime matters. One of the very vexing areas is those of us who go on fishing trips throughout the country, oftentimes not adequately equipped in a number of areas, including safety equipment such as life jackets, and without navigational aids or communication, or with no lights on the vessel, and sometimes even without adequate fuel. We have all watched and waited in dreadful anticipation when people have gone missing at sea. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, significant resources are often required to be deployed to conduct searches of missing persons. Speaker, I think the time has come, and can I say many of them are not found. Speaker, I think the time has come to begin to require minimal standards on vessels before they are to be licensed by the Port Department, and to implement a training regime for boat users. And this is a matter the Port is addressing its mind to at this time, and will implement the appropriate regulations after the appropriate consultations. Speaker, the Road Traffic Department is poised to engage in a complete overhaul of the legislative regime which governs road traffic. This is part of the IDB Road Improvement Project. A consultant has already been identified through the IDB to advise the government on critical matters
Member
affecting
for Engliston and Minister of Transport and Aviation, the Honourable Glenys Hannah Martin, presenting last night. Again, the member for Yamacraw, the Minister of Social Services, the Honourable Melanie Griffin, expected to begin this morning when they start the debate. Again, we should go until 10 p.m. tonight. We want to welcome those from 1540 The National Voice, Radio 810 in Grand Bahama, and 104.5. Let's go now to the House of Assembly, where they are preparing to begin this morning's session.
Even though I don't usually read it, it's a paraphrase because it's to the point. It says the man gave $2,000. We understand the dollars and cents. So here's the story. A nobleman living in a certain province was called away to the distant capital of the empire to be crowned king of the province. Before he left, he called together 10 assistants and gave them each $2,000 to invest while he was gone. But some of his people hated him and sent him their Declaration of Independence, stating that they had rebelled and would not acknowledge him as their king. Upon his return, he called in the men to whom he had given the money to find out what they had done with it and what their profits were. The first man reported a tremendous gain, 10 times as much as the original amount. "Fine," the king exclaimed. "You are a good man. You've been faithful with the little I entrusted to you, and as your reward, you shall be governor of 10 cities. The next man also reported a splendid gain, 5 times the original amount. "All right," the master said. "You can be governor over 5 cities. I leave the third man for tomorrow morning." Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the joy of living a new day. Thank you for June and for July, which is coming soon. We ask your grace and your mercy to be with us as we debate today's business. Bless this house today, dear Lord, and grant to your servants clarity of thought, freedom of expression, and truth that from their lips will fall with double sway. Increase the patience of our speaker, and grant to the leaders of this country the wisdom they need, not only to find the money necessary, but also to invest it properly, and to recognize that by thy mercies, all of us, no matter what amount we are asked to deal with, will have to give an account one day. We thank you for the blessings on our Commonwealth. Make it safe. Take care of those, O Lord, who have been afflicted by criminals. And we humbly beseech thee, dear Lord, to remember those who are ill and aging and sick. Have mercy upon them too. And grant that these honorable members will be able to relieve the sufferings of your people, whatever they be. And when your kingdom comes, through the grace of Jesus, who taught us when we pray to say together, "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen." Have a good day.
Good morning, honorable members. What a wonderful day in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and I am happy to be alive today. At our last sitting, when we suspended yesterday evening, we were debating second reading and committal on a bill for an act for the appropriation of diverse sums of money for and towards defraying the expenses of the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas on revenue account for the financial year commencing the 1st of July 2013 and ending the 30th of June 2014. We are debating this bill, which serves as a pivotal bill in a compilation of many bills called the National Budget Debate. The member for Yamacraw had indicated a desire to speak. The chair will recognize the member for Yamacraw at this time. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the French author Anatole France said, "To accomplish great things, we must not only act, but also dream. Not only plan, but also believe." End of quote. And Mr. Speaker, I say, any man who does not dream, who does not plan, and who does not believe is doomed to fail. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed my special privilege and honor to rise and make yet another contribution on behalf of the very fine residents of the great constituency of Yamacraw in particular, and our country in general, in this 2013-2014 budget exercise. And I give thanks to Almighty God for the opportunity to do so. Mr. Speaker, I would also wish to express my heartfelt concern over the damages incurred by flood victims, particularly those of Yamacraw. For many of them, this was déjà vu, as they relived the flood of some 15 years ago. The only difference was these floods were considered worse. Mr. Speaker, I join my colleagues from Pinewood, Seabreeze, and other flooded areas in commending the work of NEMA and all its participating agencies, which include, particularly for the assessment exercises, Social Services, Ministry of Works, Defense Force, and BIS. We thank you for your commitment, loyalty, and continued efforts in service to our country. And just to reiterate information for persons affected by the floods, assessment applications and duty exemption forms are available in the urban renewal centers in affected areas and also at the Elizabeth Estates Police Station during the day and Epiphany Anglican Church after 4 p.m. until further notice. You may also contact NEMA at 322-6081 or 322-6085 or visit their office on the first floor of the Churchill Building for assessment or further information. Mr. Speaker, we are all cognizant of the challenges our country continues to face as we recover from the throes of the global recession. It has not been easy, but I am proud to be a part of a government that is committed to making sound decisions, notwithstanding that they may be unpopular to some, to get our country back on track and to increase opportunities for employment and entrepreneurship. Mr. Speaker, this budget communication, as presented by the Right Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, represents a bold, aggressive, and comprehensive policy initiative to address public finances, introduce much-needed reforms in the fight to rescue our economy, reduce crime, create jobs, secure our borders, satisfy our mandate as set out in our Charter for Governance, and provide relief to the disadvantaged and needy in our midst, in keeping with the political ideology and philosophy of the founding fathers of this great progressive liberal party. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, I commend the Right Honourable Member for Centerville in his capacity of Minister of Finance and the Honourable Member for Golden Isles in his capacity as Minister of State for Finance, along with the staff of the Ministry of Finance, for producing, as the Prime Minister said in his communication, and I quote, "a budget that secures the future for all Bahamians." Mr. Speaker, this budget expresses the heart of a caring, considerate, and compassionate leader and government with an aggressive, socially driven agenda to wash every tear from every eye. The eyes of children who find it difficult to learn because they are not getting enough food to eat. The eyes of parents who feel a sense of hopelessness because they can no longer provide the most basic needs of food, clothing, and shelter for their families. The eyes of older persons who feel like no one cares about them. The eyes of young people who feel like no one is on their run. The eyes of persons with disabilities who feel that no one is addressing their needs. And the eyes of all those who are vulnerable among us who just feel that nobody cares. This budget declares today, Mr. Speaker, that the people first government is back. We don't mind the naysayers, Mr. Speaker. Their job is to oppose. Never mind the fact that it was their failed policies and bad management of the financial affairs of this country that have us in the deplorable state we are in today, with almost one of every $4 in revenue going to pay interest charges on the public debt and cover debt repayment, instead of going towards social, security, health, and educational programs to advance our people. We will let them talk and try to rewrite history, Mr. Speaker. The Bahamian people, with the help of God, know well how to determine what is best for them. That is why they spoke so resoundingly on May 7, 2012. We also have a legacy of abiding faith in a loving and caring God. Even though we may be going through some difficult times right now, we know within our hearts that the former administration and their disastrous fiscal policies have not taken us where our God cannot reach us. That is why the Right Honorable Member for Centerville could say with assurance in his communication, and I quote, "The economy has clearly turned the corner, and we can anticipate steady, ongoing growth and employment creation in the period ahead," end of quote. If we were in church, Mr. Speaker, I would certainly say, let the church say, Amen. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Social Services and Community Development has been at the forefront of delivering services to those who have been hardest hit by the recession. The government, through the Department of Social Services, has been as responsive as possible to those in distress. And this is indicative from the data provided by the department, which indicates, Mr. Speaker, that which indicates the following. Disability from the months, the 1st of July 2012 to the 30th of June 2013, or should I say to the end of May, actually, 2013. For disability allowance, the social services offered assistance, and that's for children with special needs, $213,360. For foster care allowance, $505,080. For child care assistance, $61,600. For Bahamas Electricity Corporation, $786,769.69. Water and sewerage, $109,339.89. For rental assistance, Mr. Speaker, $1,386,007.27. For disability allowance for temporary disability by adults, $19,860. For burial assistance, $110,620. For assistance with furniture, $131,317.23. For temporary accommodations, $130,109.20. And when we look, Mr. Speaker, at our food costs with local vendors, local food stores, we would have spent $8,817,824.64. Permanent food coupons, we would have expended $1,476,660. And temporary food assistance would have been $5,476,660. $9,500, Mr. Speaker. So we will see, based on what I've just indicated, the extent to which social services assisted persons in need. There is no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that persons who receive assistance are appreciative of what is provided, but many bemoan the length of time it can take for their application for assistance to be processed and approved, or having to wait on long lines for hours to collect food coupons at the end of the month, or not getting much needed school uniforms for their children in time for the start of the new school year. Let me hasten to say that these issues are not caused by the staff of the department not fulfilling their duties. The reality is that the volume of clients has increased, and the processes involved from the time of application to the investigation, approval, and disbursement of assistance are labor-intensive and have not kept up with the times. These issues have caused frustrations from clients and staff alike, and for years we have heard the comment, there must be a better way. Mr. Speaker, the fact is there is a better way to make the delivery of social service more efficient and less stressful for clients and staff of the department and its supporting agencies, and even for the business establishments which provide the goods and services for clients. Yes, there is a better way to ensure that those most in need receive assistance. And yes, there is a better way to break the cycle which feeds the need for continuous governmental support. Many of our counterparts in the region and other parts of the world have discovered the way, and we in the Bahamas are well on our way to joining them. Mr. Speaker, I turn now to the social safety net reform, which is a major project ongoing now in the department. It was this government that initiated the dialogue with the Inter-American Development Bank in 2002 on social safety net reform and began the process in this regard. It was this government that signed the loan agreement with the IDB on August 30, 2012 for the Bahamas Social Safety Net Reform Project. And this government will, through this project, implement the necessary reforms to bring a better and more efficient means of delivering social assistance. I am pleased to inform members that the project is well underway and when fully implemented will revolutionize the delivery of social services and strengthen the Department of Social Services. While the Ministry of Social Services and Community Development is the executing agency for the project, it is being undertaken in partnership with the Ministries of Education, Science and Technology, Health, Agriculture, Marine Resources, and Local Government, and the Department of Statistics and the Departments of Statistics and Information Technology of the Ministry of Finance. A major component of the project is the consolidation of a number of existing programs of the Department of Social Services and the introduction of a conditional cash transfer program known as the CCT, which will target households with children, households with elderly persons, households with pregnant women, and households with adult poor but without children. Mr. Speaker, this means that once the CCT is implemented, approved applicants will, instead of receiving assistance from various programs, receive a cash transfer to help them meet daily living expenses. However, households with children will be required to meet certain conditions intended to improve the health and education of the children so as to help break the cycle of poverty. Mr. Speaker, the current process by which people apply for and are approved for social assistance is very subjective. This subjectivity will be removed through the introduction of a proxy means test. We call it the PMT, which will be a requirement for all applicants. Each question on the PMT will be given a numerical weight, and a state-of-the-art management information system will determine eligibility, and the applicant will be informed on the outcome immediately before leaving the office, Mr. Speaker. That is very, very important, because right now, clients have to go into the centers. They have to do what is called an intake, an application, and then they have to leave, and then that file has to go from the center, from one officer to the next, from one desk to the next, and once the approval is given, then it's sent back down the same way, so that lengthens the process. But with this new program, before they even leave the office, the client will know whether or not they qualify to receive the assistance. Persons determined to be eligible will be visited by a social worker who will verify the information on the PMT. There will be an appeals process for persons deemed ineligible, and an appeals board will be established for this purpose. Mr. Speaker, I can report that the PMT was piloted last month in 4 islands: New Providence, Grand Bahama, Eleuthera, and Cat Island. I had the opportunity to sit in on the debriefing session with the staff from the 4 islands who administered the PMT and the IDB consultant who designed it along with the project team leader. The consensus was that while there were some minor issues, primarily with the wording of some of the questions, the pilot went very well. The feedback will allow for the consultant to make the necessary adjustments to the form so as to ensure that it meets its intended purpose when put into use. The health and educational conditions that households with children will have to meet have been determined by the respective ministries and are being fine-tuned with the assistance of external consultants. Households with children who meet the stipulated conditions will receive the full monthly benefits, but those who fail to do so will receive a reduced benefit. It is not the intent to create hardships for persons by reducing benefits, but we must appreciate the need to enhance the health and education of our children so that they are not destined for a life of poverty. And the objectives of the project is to build human capital and modify behavior to eliminate dependency on welfare. Mr. Speaker, several options for the payment of the transfer are being explored. And while the proposed method has not yet been determined, I can tell you that persons will no longer have to key up at the end of the month outside an outreach center, often exposed to the elements, and wait online sometimes for hours to receive assistance. The consultants assisting in determining what the method of transfer should be are in town right now, Mr. Speaker, and in fact, I had a brief meeting with them this morning before I came to this honorable place. And they'll be meeting with public officers, private institutions, including banks. And they will also make visits to Cat Island and Eleuthera in the process. I told them this morning about the beautiful waters of Cat Island, which they will probably not be able to get into. Mr. Speaker, child welfare matters. In April, the Department of Social Services, in conjunction with the National Child Protection Council and the Suspected Child Abuse and Neglect Unit, SCAN, of the Ministry of Health, held a very successful Child Protection Month. In addition to participating in a number of activities in New Providence, I attended functions in Grand Bahama and Eleuthera. The theme for this year was protecting children in a changing world. This was indeed a very timely theme, Mr. Speaker, because it is important that we raise the level of public awareness about some new threats emerging that can bring us all harm, but particularly can cause harm to our unsuspecting and trusting children. These include, Mr. Speaker, the Internet and other high-tech gadgets and equipment, which can be very helpful if put to good use, but can also be harmful when used the wrong way. Mr. Speaker, at the Child Protection Youth Rallies in New Providence and Eleuthera, I discovered that a high percentage of our children have access to computers at home or at school, which is good in itself, and that many of them personally own iPads, iPods, iPhones, Kindles, Samsung Galaxy 5, or some other technological device that allows them to connect with the world at the touch of a button. The most frightening thing for me, though, Mr. Speaker, was the large numbers of children who indicated that they had access to Skype. I thought chat rooms was, dangerous for children, but they really didn't have too much interest in the chat rooms. But when I talked about Skype, every child's hand went up. And Skype or some other device which allows them to see and talk to the person they are connected to in real time. Real FaceTime? Yeah, well, to me that's real time. But they call it FaceTime? FaceTime, okay. But, Mr. Speaker, the point here is, it could be good, and it is meant for good, but we know that people pervert things for their own personal gain. So parents and guardians, I implore you to monitor your children's use of technology and warn them of the dangers of posting pictures, videos, or comments on the internet that could cause embarrassment to them and their families in any way. The use of chat rooms and social networks like Facebook should also be monitored. Technology has opened the door to new ways for sexual predators to reach our children. We have all seen how viral the videos and photos can go on the internet. So please remember, if you don't remember anything else I say today, there is no substitution for parental guidance. Please monitor your children as they use these instruments. Remember, these instruments are not meant to be babysitters. And often, because I know, they sit in front of it and they sit and they utilize these equipment, for hours and hours and hours. We must monitor it. We must put in place a system that they're not on it for so long. Mr. Speaker, just to indicate the child abuse reported case statistics from from January to May 2013, in New Providence, there were 181 cases of reported child abuse. In Grand Bahama, there were 107 cases for a total of 288 cases. We also have this stacks up against in 2011 for the same period there were 254 reported cases. And so we see, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't able to find at the time the 2012 report, but definitely it's on the increase. Additionally, during the Child Protection Month, a series of seminars were held for children entitled, I Got a Right. The seminars were designed to educate children and young persons about the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and sessions are continued throughout the course of the year. Simpson Penn and William A. Pratt Centers. Mr. Speaker, in my contribution to the 2012-2013 budget debate, I made members aware of the deplorable physical conditions at the Simpson Penn Center for Boys. In my contribution to the mid-year budget statement, I shared some of the improvements that have been made up to that point. And I am pleased today to say that there has been a tremendous improvement in the physical conditions at the center. Some may even refer to it as a transformation. To date, Mr. Speaker, the government has spent some $288,000 on repairs and upgrades to the facility. These include the following: construction of a new security booth at the entrance, repairs to the roof of the multipurpose building which houses the kitchen and dining room, new security bars and doors, electrical upgrades in cottages, including the installation of tamper-resistant lights, replacements of windows and screens, which is still in progress, purchase of durable institutional bunk beds, complete with lockable drawers for storage of small personal items, purchase of new mattresses, contracted private waste collection services, new fencing around the pavilion at the front of Cottage 2 where the young men come together and they're able to watch TV and recreate. And also an automatic transfer switch for the generator, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just thought that I would bring these photos to show you where we are, to show the House where we are. And I can tell you these will be probably the last set of photos I'll be bringing, because once the work is completed, I will invite all honorable members to visit the center to see it, to view it for themselves. And so, Mr. Speaker, if we're talking about the restrooms, the renovation to the restrooms, we've been able to, the renovation to the bedrooms. I just want to show you the beds are all in place and all made up. With the new equipment, the new beds that we would have put in place. There you have it all made up, and these are institutional grade. Okay, I didn't want to go into all of that today. Also, as we begin to the pavilion, I just talked about the pavilion. That is the pavilion. This had all kind of old clapboard and thing around it, and we are putting new fencing so that the boys are well in view. The residents are well in view. Mr. Speaker, no. Okay, again, this is that again is the pavilion outside with the new fencing, and this is the beds. And then, Mr. Speaker, particularly the team that would have gone with me when we went in there before we came to office will appreciate these bathrooms, Mr. Speaker, with stainless steel basins, state-of-the-art, institutional fixtures.
Oh, wonderful.
This is the shower. Actually, they wanted us to actually show the water coming down in the basin and all. Thank God I don't need you to get me into heaven.
There you go. Look at that, eh?
All right.
Man. Yes, yes, yes.
Looking for the one with the toilet.
Oh, man, this is beautiful. This is beautiful.
Mr. Speaker, to the toilet bowl. Oh, okay. Mr. Speaker, this is the one. Oh, yeah, right there. Mr. Speaker, here it is. We have, this is the commode, stainless steel institutional grade commode.
Yes, yes.
There you go. And then, of course, the showers everywhere has been gutted. They were gutted. This is how they look when they were gutted. This is when they gutted. These restrooms were in such bad condition that they were gutted down to this, and everything replaced. Everything replaced. And this is what was put in place.
Yeah.
The showers.
Well done. Securing our future.
That's right. This is you talk when you talk about. You know, I heard the member for Montague talking about how the inmates are treated at the prison. But I wonder if he had ever seen how those children were being, those boys, young boys, were being treated in Simpson Pen. If he ever visited there and saw the conditions they were in. You know, that's... he probably wouldn't even have gone. And then, of course, we have the dining area. I mean, the staff of there, Mr. Speaker, they are so motivated. Well, first of all, let me finish with the cottages. This is the new kitchenette setup in the cottage themselves. These were all, I mean, all the doors broken off, or the cabinets. And what we have is these Formica, this is not the Formica you could peel off. These are the ones that come onto the wood itself. And so they should last for a very, very long time. And again, of course, we can't show you enough of these bathrooms. I could tell you, you know, it is so difficult to go in there. And Mr. Speaker, the staff is so motivated and their morale is so high, you know, that they even decided that after we did the repairs in the dining hall where the boys eat, that they would go, you know, that they would get curtains and put it up. And this is now, they have improved the dining hall.
Show the speaker so you know.
And I can tell you, these are the furnitures from the first set of renovations that we left from when we were there in 2000. Yeah, that's the dining area. Just another one.
But they say we only dream.
Listen here, you got to dream, you got to plan, and you have to believe.
That's it.
That's what you have to do, and to secure the future of our young men. And so, Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt that the money was well spent, or rather well invested. We cannot, in good conscience, have high expectations for juvenile offenders after they are released if they are housed in the type of environment these young men had to endure for the last few years. But, Mr. Speaker, as indicated, the work is not complete. Currently, extensive plumbing works are being undertaken in the cottages at a cost of $222,962. These include, as I've shown you, the gutting of the bathrooms and the installation of tiles and pipes and stainless steel. And you know, Mr. Speaker, we are truly impressed by the work thus far, and I am advised that the plumbing contractor has exceeded the scope of works of the contract and included upgrades that were not scoped or even included in the cost at his own expense. We are indeed grateful to him for these extras. Further, while not included in the contract, the contractor has, at our request, made provisions for the placement of a commode and basin in each dormitory of the cottage for use at night, and we are seeking the necessary approvals so that these can be functional in short order. But, Mr. Speaker, we are still not complete. The government has approved additional works for the center in the amount of $199,792, and these include repairs to the administration building, inclusive of electrical, plumbing, and air conditioning works at an estimated cost of $160,845, the construction of a pavilion to the east of the security booth to serve as a waiting area for visitors, and repairs to the tailor shop. Mr. Speaker, the works at the Simpson Pen Center total a whopping $710,754, which does not include the commode and basin for the dormitories, which will cost an additional $128,028 $66 for an additional funding, and that gives us a grand total committed to Simpson Penn Center for $838,820. Mr. Speaker, fun? Mr. Speaker, we are well aware that you can't just fix the facilities and leave the personal well-being of the young men alone. And so we are well aware that the physical improvements will mean little if there is no rehabilitation of residents and the transmission of practical skills. For the first time, to my knowledge, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas Technical Vocational and Vocation Institute conducted a training program on-site over a period of 15 weeks for the older residents who are past the mandatory school age. The residents participated in a masonry and painting program and also courses in English, maths, and first aid as a part of the training. The residents completed minor repairs and painted some of the buildings on the compound, and 3 of the residents have since been discharged and were successful in gaining full-time admission to BTVI. And we already have their proposal for the September term. Mr. Speaker, the Penn Pratt Coeducational Unit, which is on the compound, is operated by the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology, and allows for the continued education of residents of both Simpson Penn and William A. Pratt who have not attained the mandatory school leaving age. We have commenced dialogue with the Ministry of Education with the view of having the older residents continue their education as well. Mr. Speaker, when we went there were boys between the ages of 16 to 18 just with absolutely nothing to do during the course of the day. Those of school age in school, they have nothing to do. No rehabilitation, Mr. Speaker. That was so wrong, and so we've made a move to deal with that situation. The technical officers of my ministry have been in dialogue also with BAIC for some time for the establishment of an agricultural program at the center. And we have a considerable amount of land there that is available to us that is laying idle. And we are more than excited that the centers and our seniors and children's homes have been included in the program foreshadowed by the Right Honorable Member for Centerville in his budget communication for the installation of greenhouses for gardening purposes. And this program will provide much-needed therapy, employment, and produce for the tables of the respective facilities. I wish to commend the visiting committee for Simpson Penn and their president, who held a successful gala ball last month to raise funds for the center. And they, at the same time, honored several persons who, volunteers who worked at who offered their services to the center. Their theme was Saving Boys, Building Men. And we were certainly delighted to have the Honorable Dr. Bernard Nottage, the member for Bain and Grantstown, provide good food for thought as the guest speaker at that event, and of course the attendance of the newly appointed at that time Deputy to the Governor General, former Speaker Mr. Oswald Ingram. At William A. Pratt, the physical condition of William A. Pratt Center was not found to be in the same state, but there's still much work to be done to improve the environment there and the programs, environment and programs for the staff. So we've already done some improvements in terms of electrical upgrades and contracted private waste collection services. And the Ministry of Works has indicated the need for plumbing upgrades in the cottages and construction of a new security booth at the entrance. And we are awaiting a full technical assessment to determine the scope of works. And we already have approval, a small contract in place for $10,000 to repair a portion of the roof for the administration building. Mr. Speaker, we have also obtained a commitment from BTVI for on-site training for the 16 to 18-year-olds at the William A. Pratt, and their training will include, and that will start in September, and include computer classes, sewing, cosmetology, English, and math. And we are also grateful to Mr. Jeffrey Ambrose and the Rotary Club of Nassau for the donation of 6 computers to facilitate the computer program. Mr. Speaker, the residents of William A. Pratt decided not to let the young men at Simpson Pen outdo them, and I am happy to report that 4 residents of William A. Pratt participated in the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture's E. Clement Bethel National Arts Festival individual verse-speaking competition for New Providence for grades 10 to 12. They were coached by a volunteer to the center, Mrs. Helen Turnquest, and 3 of the young ladies were successful in earning first, second, and third place award. Wow. One of these residents is now discharged and has been accepted to BTVI, where the Department of Social Services will assist with the fees. I also wish to take the opportunity to commend Mrs. Doris Barry and the Visiting Committee of William A. Pratt for their commitment to work with the residents and to raise funds there for various projects as well. Community Affairs Division, while tourism, expenditure, and benefits derived from offshore banks are vital for the advancement of our economy, our potential lies in our people. The Community Affairs Division provides and develops programs that strengthen families and communities, and this is done primarily through family life centers in Flamingo Gardens, Elizabeth Estates, and I think it's called Adastra Estates in the area, I think that's in Fort Charlotte. The division has operated an after-school program at the centers in Elizabeth Estates and Flamingo Gardens for several years. It's conducted by trained teachers Monday to Thursday of each week during the school term, and it is projected that we will be beginning a similar program at Adastra Estates in September. Friday afternoons at Flamingo Gardens and Elizabeth Estates allow children and young persons to engage in structured fun activities through the Boys and Girls Club. We must also say that since its opening, activities at the center and Flamingo Gardens have been held primarily in the afternoons, but we have now placed in there a community affairs officer for the purpose of opening the center during the day, and efforts are now underway to begin a senior citizens group. And they had the introductory meeting there on May 17th. The senior citizens group at the Elizabeth Estates Center, Estates, those small, meets regularly, and we also have increased the staff there and the center, hence we anticipate the expansion of the senior citizens group there and other programs in that area. Similar, along with the establishment of similar groups in Flamingo Gardens and Adastra Estates. Mr. Speaker, members will be aware of a phenomenon called the digital divide. The term is used to explain another difference between the haves and the have-nots, which is access to information on the Internet. The government recognizes the need to bridge the divide, hence we propose to upgrade and increase the number of computers at both Flamingo Gardens and Elizabeth Estates so that computer classes will be available to persons in these communities. And the newest family life center in Adastra is already fully equipped with computers, and they have, with the assistance of a qualified instructor, some 15 adults and senior citizens seize the opportunity to enhance their skills or become computer literate. Mr. Speaker, during my tenure as Minister of Social Services and Community Development, a literacy program was operated at the center in Elizabeth Estates, and we intend to bring that. It was, for whatever reason, discontinued. We intend to bring that back because the higher literacy rates within our communities allow for better economic development in the long run. We also intend to introduce community mentoring programs geared towards young persons and monthly forums for each center on topical issues. Mr. Speaker, gender-based violence, we would all agree that the level of domestic violence in our country, as in the case globally, is unacceptably high, and efforts have been made both at the international and local levels to address this problem. In December, I attended, along with one of my other cabinet colleagues, a multidisciplinary team of public officers, a Caribbean dialogue on the rule of law and gender-based violence in Miami, Florida, which was organized by the United States Department of State, Secretary's Office of Global Women's Issues. And the dialogue brought together rule of law practitioners and advance the agenda for the prevention and response to gender-based violence and best practices shared from within the Caribbean and across Latin America. In March, I attended the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women under the theme Elimination and Prevention of All Forms of Violence Against Women and Girls. And on International Women's Day here, March 8th, we had a seminar which was well attended and carried live over Radio Bahamas 1540 Immediate Response. I also participated in the Grand Bahama 4th Annual Join Me on the Bridge program by the women there in that, on that afternoon. Mr. Speaker, we also in the ministry initiated last July a community-based public education campaign on the Domestic Violence Protection Orders Act entitled Domestic Violence is Everybody's Business, and we're moving around through the communities ensuring that everyone public education on that legislation, which is a major piece of legislation that I really don't think is used enough. And I think, you know, if the former administration had just taken the time to sit down long enough and read that legislation and try to put forward the necessary public education on it, we would have been farther advanced in dealing with much of our domestic violence concerns. We thank the United States Embassy for facilitating the visit of Mr. Ulester Douglas in April. He is the Associate Director of the organization Men Stopping Violence, and he came to participate in a number of events, including a men's summit, a panel discussion along with a number of local presenters, and a train-the-trainer session geared towards primarily for men, all of which were well received. Mr. Speaker, there's no one agency of the government that has the capacity to address the issue of domestic violence. And so I'm happy to report that a multi-sectoral task force under the ministry has been established, and our mandate is to refine and implement a national strategic plan and other initiatives to address gender-based violence. Additionally, a cabinet committee comprising of ministers responsible for social services, health, education, and national security and legal services have oversight of the work of the task force. We have identified a chairperson, and that group, that committee will become, our task force will become operational by next month. The Bureau of Women's Affairs, Mr. Speaker, when we were first in office, for the first time, we implemented a line item for the Bureau, which started at $10,000. When we came back to office, they were getting $65,000. And in the 2012-2013 budget, we gave it an increase to $100,000, and that has really enabled them to do a lot more of workshops and implement activities, as well as, of course, as we would all remember, the 50th anniversary of the enfranchisement of women's celebrations, which I think was well received, and we will all remember the commitment in the joint parliament of all sides to ensure that we do what is necessary to equalize, indeed rigorous, and that is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And the Bahamas at that time was putting forward its initial and up to fifth periodic report. And it was a rigorous process, but the experience was educational and enlightening. And I'd like to thank all those who played a role in ensuring the success of that mission. We were also grateful to receive grants from UN Women, the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality known as UN Women, and the United Nations Populations Fund for the advancement of women's work here in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, in addition to working with non-governmental women's organizations, the Bureau is also working with men in their efforts to eliminate violence against women, in particular the local branch of the Caribbean Male Action Network. Mr. Speaker, I am hopeful and optimistic that as this organization grows and develops, it will play an important role working with men and young boys to decrease violence against women and young girls. We are pleased to advise that the work of the Bureau, we've been able to expand it beyond just New Providence and beyond just Grand Bahama. Just last month, our team spent 2 days and holding sessions in North, Central, and South Eleuthera. And it is our plan to carry all of our programs, as much as we can, to all of the family islands, inclusive of whatever the Women's Bureau does, to make sure that we reach our women in the family islands. Disability affairs. I continue to be cognizant of the many challenges and discriminatory practices facing the community of persons with disabilities. Upon returning to office, May 2012, we met a draft in place which we reviewed and determined that it was yet too complicated. We then moved to review it.
Member for Yamacraw, take your seats just for a second. Members, just wanted to announce that we have been having technical difficulties for the last few moments. So we've in fact been off air. So member, I'm going to ask you when we resume to go back a few pages, because we've been off the air for the last few moments. So we're going to call. The chair is requesting a brief suspension, a 5-minute suspension. About 4 minutes. Thank you very much, Sergeant. Brief suspension.
All right.
And it gave us a great opportunity for us transition before we invite the member for Yamacraw to continue. We had some visitors in our gallery. We are certainly delighted to have them. Hillcrest Academy, who briefly came and had to leave. 16 students joined us, led by Ms. Lambert, Ms. Burrows, and Mrs. Thurston. And we're delighted always when young persons are here, joining us here at the Honorable House of Assembly. And we are delighted to have with us remaining the school, primary school of Burnt Rock Primary in the constituency of Mangrove Key and South Andros. Let us welcome them. Yes, delighted to have them. They are led by Mrs. Larimore and Mrs. Burrows. And so we're delighted to have you and your wonderful children joining us today. And I'm made to understand that His Excellency and the member for Mangrove Key and South Andros will be treating you to lunch today. So that's a wonderful gesture by the honorable member. With that, members, let us continue our proceedings. The chair would welcome the member for Yamacraw to continue her presentation. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think at the time when we probably went off air, I was talking about the expansion of the Women's Bureau into the family islands beyond New Providence and Grand Bahama. And last month, 2 of our team was in North, Central, and South Eleuthera. and we want to ensure that we include the family islands in all of these various arms of the ministry, and particularly the Women's Bureau, so that women's issues throughout the islands can be addressed. With regard to disability affairs, again, we recognize the importance of leveling the playing field for persons with disabilities, and we have reviewed and redrafted the draft legislation that we met in place, and we believe we now have a document that all will be pleased with, and we have already begun the circulation process. Well, actually, we've sent the draft to the Disability Committee, and they will have a week to respond. Then we'll take it to Cabinet, and hopefully, I promised when I attended a conference for the National Council for Persons with Disability, I think it was in December, that we would bring that. I made a commitment to bring that legislation to Parliament by June, and I am working diligently to fulfill that commitment. Also, we have, with advice from the Attorney General's office in hand, we are now able to move forward. We understand with the signing of the United Nations Convention on Persons, on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and the Cabinet paper seeking that approval. The approval of my colleagues is being prepared as I speak. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the signing of the United Nations Convention and the Disability Bill, the Right Honourable Member for Centerville in the budget communication indicated the intent of the government to rent and renovate Our Lady's Catholic Primary School to accommodate some 100 special needs children. He even went further, Mr. Speaker, to announce the government's intent to construct on New Providence an educational and multi-purpose facility for persons with special needs. And I am elated about this and the tremendous potential that both of these projects bring for the community of persons with disabilities. And my ministry is looking forward to collaborating with the relevant ministries of the government and non-governmental organizations on both of these facilities, but particularly also the multi-purpose facility. In conjunction with the Ministries of Education, Health, my ministry and the Bahamas Association for the Physically Disabled, my ministry operates the center in BAPD building on Dolphin Drive for children with severe physical disabilities. And this center accommodates 26 children each week. And while its reach is limited because of its resources, it is meeting a great need. And we do commend all the workers there, all the parents, for their commitment, and of course, Sir Durward, who has taken a personal interest in it, and his daughter, who, of course, when he's unable to be there, she has is in place. With regard to social services, the department is projected to receive $39,868,059 in this budget for the fiscal year. While this is marginally less than the approved estimates of 2012-2013, given that national insurance contributions and rent costs in particular, which far exceed the minimal reduction, have been pulled out from Head 44 and placed under other heads, the projected allocation is generous and indicative of the government's ongoing commitment to provide social protection to those in need. Just over 2.8 million is proposed for Family Island operations, excluding Grand Bahama and Abaco, which are provided for under the relevant line items. Increased provisions have been made for the Food Assistance Program and the National Lunch Program. Previously, the allocation for the department's Work Assistance Program was by way of a line item, assistance to individuals under Block 90, but this item has been removed and provisions for work program participants have been put in Block 1 under salary for contractual workers. Mr. Speaker, social services is often the recipient of negative comments, but many persons do not realize or appreciate the many roles the department is required to play. One such role is in disasters, and we are well aware of the extensive flooding in New Providence last month, and officers were present at NEMA around the clock on a rotation basis with the Emergency Operations Center when the Emergency Operations Center was activated. When the decision was taken to open shelters, the department immediately secured emergency relief supplies and opened and operated the shelters with staff as shelter managers. Officers from the department were once again called into action to serve on the assessment teams going door to door in the communities, in affected communities, and to assist in determining needs. On Sunday past, we also had a representative from the department who visited Exuma along with the Deputy Prime Minister and other agencies, and I wish to commend the staff for their quick and committed response. Mr. Speaker, the department is being called upon to respond more and more to persons who for various reasons find themselves homeless, and we are grateful to agencies like the Salvation Army and Great Commission Ministries who offer emergency shelter and favorably respond to our requests once space is available. While there's a small number of motels that accept homeless persons on a short-term basis, there's a need for more facilities like those operated by the Salvation Army, where in addition to persons being provided with a bed and a meal, there's some level of counseling and support also provided. Last year I had some discussions with the Christian Council in this regard, and I hope to be able to call on the faith-based community to further consider any assistance we could receive in this regard. The National Parenting Program, which was is now well established and functioning very well. In 2012, there were a total of 293 parents and guardians who participated in the program, and they also provide support group for all participants who complete the training, and we're looking forward to their further expansion. Mr. Speaker, it is my firm belief that it should be mandatory for parents and guardians of residents at Simpson Penn and Willa May Pratt to participate in the program. While the law actually says that the courts may commit or submit parents and guardians to the National Parenting Program, we were seriously looking at changing the law to make it mandatory that parents of all children who go up to those centers take the parenting program, because all too often the parents take the children there, they leave them there, they don't visit them, and there's no real interaction in their lives, and that creates a further problem for us. And then, of course, when the children are released, they have to go back into those homes, and they're, with the same issues that they left. And so we're looking to have a look at that legislation. I'm pleased to report the completion of repairs to the Early Childhood Development Center on East Street South, which is operated by the department. Repairs in the amount of $48,000 included exterior painting, replacement of defective shingles. That center is operated by the School Welfare Division of the department, and the current enrollment is 50 children, 18 of whom will move on to grade 1 primary school in September. Urban renewal, Mr. Speaker, social services component of urban renewal is now operational in New Providence and Grand Bahama. Last November, the government approved the engagement of 17 social workers specifically for the program, and the first group of 6 began their work in New Providence in January 2013, and to date, 9 of the centers in New Providence are outfitted with social workers who work feverishly to address the social needs of the respective communities. And their activities include walkabouts in the communities with the police and other agencies, conducting investigations to assist clients who are in need of assistance, conducting parenting seminars, therapeutic group and individual counseling with suspended students, and at one center, counseling with children who have witnessed violence, assessments for house repairs, which comprise the bulk of the work, and assistance with flood assessments. Additionally, the New Providence workers also assisted in organizing the Child Protection Rally on Windsor Park during Child Protection Month. With respect to Grand Bahama, 4 persons have been engaged in addition to the coordinator, and an additional 2 persons are expected to start shortly. The workers, like their counterparts in New Providence, have been attached to centers and perform similar duties. I wish to commend the coordinators and staff for the enthusiasm with which they have approached their assignment and their willingness to work on weekends and beyond normal working hours. And I have been getting very, very good reports about the work of the social workers in the various communities, along with their counterparts in the Urban Renewal Office. With regard to accommodations, Mr. Speaker, for the past several years, the Administration of Social Services and Community Development was conducted from 2 locations, East Hill Street and Frederick Street. This, of course, has been very challenging and negatively impacted cohesion. In April, the staff from the Frederick Street office was relocated to East Hill Street, and while the accommodations are cramped, we are at least under one roof. We are, however, scheduled to move into new accommodations by the summer in Aventura Plaza on Bethel Avenue and JFK Drive in the Aventura Plaza. In addition to the 2-story suite for the ministry and supporting units, Human Resources and Accounts, the Bureau of Women's Affairs, the Social Safety Net Reform Project, and the Community Affairs Division will each have a suite in the complex. Further, a suite in the complex will be utilized as an after-school center for children of employees in the complex, which will be operated by the Community Affairs Division of the ministry. And we are anxiously awaiting the move to more spacious accommodation, and which I am sure will boost staff morale and increase efficiency. The ongoing unsatisfactory physical condition of accommodations in the Department of Social Services in the Clarence Bain building, Mr. Speaker, continues to negatively impact productivity and staff morale, and these include issues with air conditioning and plumbing in particular. The Ministry of Public Works and Urban Development continues to address these issues, and I am aware that a workable solution is under consideration. Hopefully, the staff of the department will be adequately accommodated in as short a time as possible. I am also acutely aware of the accommodation issues at the department's outreach center on Horseshoe Drive, which are negatively impacting staff and clients alike. And here again, it seems like as soon as one issue is addressed, another comes up. But the Ministry of Works facilitated the replacement of 2 air-conditioned units in May, and they have not been functioning properly, and we hope that that matter will be corrected shortly. Mr. Speaker, that center has definitely outgrown its clientele, which include communities southwest of New Providence, and we are diligently seeking accommodations on Carmichael Road to open a center to serve that segment of New Providence. And a number of buildings have been looked at, and once we are determined which one of these is the best option, we hope to the Minister for the Public Services and with responsibility for accommodations and his staff is assisting us in that regard. In North Lustra, the office accommodations were relocated and to better accommodations. The one that they were previously in was in deplorable condition, but we know that the staff is quite pleased at where they have been moved to. I'm also pleased to report that we have secured additional space in the Park Plaza and Fox Hill to facilitate the expansion of the outreach center in the east. And once that work is completed, it will ease the cramped conditions there and make it more comfortable for staff and clients. And I understand that BTC has already moved out, and we're making a mad dash to get the additional space so that we can expand the office further. And I understand that one of my colleagues is in competition for that space, and we're hoping to get there before him, although his money may be quicker than ours. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Approval has been given for the relocation of the Department of Social Services in Freeport, Grand Bahama, which currently operates out of 3 suites in the National Insurance Building, and the relocation to Sun Plaza will allow for expansion and result in all areas being housed under one roof. Currently, some internal configuration and repairs are being undertaken, and this should be completed for relocation by July. With regard to the career path, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to report that work was done on the career path for social workers on a proposal submitted to the Public Service Union. We are awaiting their counter-proposal for consideration to proceed with the process, and hopefully in the new fiscal year we'll be able to deal with that matter. I also wish to thank the Permanent Secretary, senior officers and staff of the Ministry and Department of Social Services for the yeoman's task they do in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Let's continue to work together to create a social service of which we can all be proud. Mr. Speaker, I cannot sit really without addressing the National Training Agency as the Minister of Social Services and Community Development. I look forward to the implementation of the agency and what it means to the future development of our human capital. And I wish to commend the Prime Minister and the Minister of Labor and National Insurance for this bold and progressive initiative, which will equip Bahamians with the necessary practical competencies and skills to meet the current and future demands of the workforce, shared employment and entrepreneurial opportunities which will present themselves through the various developments in New Providence and many of our family islands. I encourage our people to prepare themselves for the National Training Agency and take advantage of all it offers. Just a very quick, Mr. Speaker, expression of congratulations on behalf of the entire staff of Social Services. I wish to send a shout out to social worker Ida Seymour, who was joined in marriage to Mr. Walker Walks at Transformation Baptist Church last Saturday. Best wishes and blessings to Ida and her husband as they begin their new life together. Also, a constituency update, just a quick constituency update. Apart from our ongoing programs, we are currently replacing the monument sign to the entrance of Nassau East South. Work is imminent to improve the playground area on the park on Willard Road in Eastern Estates, resurface the walking track on the Winton Park, and replace the track on the Rugby Road Park east of Winton. I'm also excited to proceed with a project I initiated in June 2010 to develop a community park at the Blue Hole site in Colony Village. Mr. Speaker, it is just a beautiful and amazing thing to see how Mother Nature works. Right smack dab in the middle of Yamacraw, in the heart of Colony Village, is a blue hole. Can you believe it? And in 2010, I initiated dialogue with the Bahamas National Trust, and they gave me a report and some recommendations on what ought to be done, and we intend to proceed with that in this fiscal year. And plans are also underway to bring urban renewal to the east, Mr. Speaker. And I wish to thank the Right Honorable Prime Minister and Member of Parliament for Centerville for delivering on this commitment he made to residents at a meeting in January, a meeting in Yamacraw, January past. And so, in short order, Seabreeze, Fox Hill, and St. Anne's, and Elizabeth, of course, we expect to have urban renewal in the east. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, as we approach our 40th anniversary of independence, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all Bahamians of our shared dreams and values. I believe there's more that unites us than divides us. Let us work together to rebuild this country and ensure the future for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, Yamacraw confirms and reaffirms its confidence in the member for Centerville, the Right Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie, the undisputed father of the House, and his ability, along with his team, to keep this ship of state steady as she goes and steer it safe to port. Mr. Speaker, Yamacraw supports this progressive and people-centered budget I thank you. Huh?
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Michael.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And allow me, Mr. Speaker, to start and I consider this one of perhaps my briefest contribution to a budget debate, because I intend not to speak too long. Yeah, that's fine. I don't intend to speak too long, Mr. Speaker, but I trust that I will cover those things which are important to the Bahamian people and my obligation as Minister responsible for agriculture, marine resources, local government, among some other things. Mr. Speaker, before I start to speak to the budget, though, I'd like to salute the people of the Macau constituency, Meguana, Acklands, Crooked Island, Long Key, and Inagua. It is on their shoulders, Mr. Speaker, that I stand whenever I make my way to my feet in this place. They are the wind beneath my wings, and they know it. I love them, and I think for the most part they love me. And, Mr. Speaker, I am told that there is a move afoot. You know, I had spoken to not being willing to offer again for Parliament. But you know, Mr. Speaker, I heard some rumblings lately that the member for North Abaco may be coming back. And if he come back, I might come back. I just might come back.
Former member.
Former member, that's right. You know, I just might come back. And I know my wife is going to be upset about that. But, you know, I just want to be here whenever he comes back, if he does. And I believe that that will be certainly intriguing to me, sufficiently that I could reconsider. The second thing is, Mr. Speaker, I am told that my cousin and my friend Sidney Colley might want to run against me again. I'd love that challenge. That's another reason why I might consider. Because if he does, he'll never see this place. Not if he expects to run against me. So those things are fluid. They keep changing. And again, I might have to just reconsider. Just reconsider. That's how life is. But for now, I am still minded that these might be my final years in this place. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me also extend sympathies to the families of 3 members of the Meguana community. They passed away less than a week ago, perhaps. 3 of them almost in succession. Mr. Vincent Mitchell, he passed away about a week ago. And I want to extend sincerest sympathy to his family. He's from Betsy's Bay. And then Mr. Alfred McKinney from Pirates Well, Meguana. I'd like to extend sincerest sympathy to his family. And then Mr. Bradley Charlton from Abraham's Bay, Meguana. I want to extend sympathies to his family as well. I know that these are difficult times, but the same God that bring them to it will take them through it, and we pray their strength. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to congratulate the students of the graduating classes, primary and secondary classes in the various schools in the islands that I represent. I've been invited to a few graduations over the last few days, but alas, I'm not able to attend those graduations because I'm here. And, Mr. Speaker, I have a formula which perhaps is not a bad one. When you have 4 graduations and you can't attend all of them, the best way, I think, not to offend any is to write to all of them so that they can read them in their graduation exercises. Because, you know, I have a very jealous constituency when it comes to islands. If I went to one and could not go to the other, I find that they are upset. And so it makes it kind of difficult when you have 5 islands and all of them want to see you at the same time, like independence celebrations. It makes it very difficult. But, you know, my prayers are always with them, and they know that if I could be, I would be. But it's sometimes difficult to do so. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to extend Father's Day greetings to all of the fathers in the Bahamas, generally, and particularly those fathers who live in the Macau constituency. Sunday's Father's Day, and I know that children everywhere will look after their fathers as they should, and I certainly wish all fathers well on that very special day. Mr. Speaker, the constituency that I represent had a relatively good year, considering the austere times in which we live. Over the past several months, Mr. Speaker, I have been able to give musical instruments, some 13 instruments to the school in Acklands, some 11, 12 instruments to the school, musical instruments to the school in Crooked Island. The instruments for Inagua School, they have landed in Inagua. I have not yet had the chance to go and distribute them, but the instruments are there, and I hope I will soon be able to do so. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the needs of my constituency, I think it is only for me to say that I'm grateful for the government's intention to build or rebuild, if I could put it that way, the roads in South Acklands. It's been announced by the Prime Minister, and I am so glad that, alas, we can look forward to the roads in Acklands being rebuilt as it has been for at least 4 or 5 years in disrepair, and the recent rains have made certain areas almost impassable. And so I'm hoping, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister of Works and his team would certainly pay hurried attention to the execution of that possibility. Mr. Speaker, the school in Inagua has been announced for construction, and I'm really glad about that, Mr. Speaker, because when we were in office in 2007, a contract was signed for the construction of the high school in Inagua, and under the F&M's review, stop, review, and cancel policy, that school was canceled. So was the school in Salina Point, and I'm hoping that that too will soon be on the drawing board. The minister is behind me, and he is saying, oh yeah, it'll soon be. Well, you know, that's good news, even though I know it had not been announced yet in this budget. I'm sure within this term, that school in Salina Point would certainly be built. And then, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that the government would find the resources to put portable water in Crooked Island. Crooked Island has been without water for a long time, and I'm hoping that we could get some relief to Crooked Island in the shortest possible time, and I'm going to certainly hope that we could do so within this term. Mr. Speaker, you know, money is really tight, and when I speak to hope, it is just that. I really hope that the financial resources of our country will permit most, if not all, of the things that the people of our country need to happen. I went to Long Island over the weekend, and Mr. Speaker, there was a settlement in Long Island. I think it's Dunmore Town, or I think it's Dunmore Town. Mr. Speaker, I was just driving around with my family, and I stopped there. I don't know why. There was a church on the hill, and the church was so pretty, even though it is of ancient vintage. I went up there just to see the church. And the settlement had about 5 houses, 7 houses perhaps. And I thought I better just walk around and say hello to everybody. And I did that. Mr. Speaker, they are a poor people. And I was moved with compassion as I walked through, and I did what I could for them. And there was an elderly lady, I think her name was Adriana Taylor. Adriana Taylor, I think it was. And Mr. Speaker, when I left her house and went to her neighbor's house, there was a neighbor that had some very sick children, and I had written to social services about them. But I know they're being assisted. But Mr. Speaker, I'm telling you, there is a need, as I feel to say, for us as a Bahamian people to know what our neighbors' situations are like and do what we can. Those who can should help those who cannot, because the government will never be able to do everything for everyone all the time. And so as we move about as politicians, as we move about just as good citizens, it's important for me to just say that whenever we can help somebody who needs help. I think there is a song which ends by saying your living will not be in vain. And wherever there is suffering, I think we need to do what we can. And I had promised, and I remind my wife just a couple of hours ago to let's do something for that settlement. I don't even know those people beyond that visit. But I can assure you I will do what I can for that settlement, because that's the only one I had the time to visit. But there may be many more around the country like that, and wherever we can find them, let's lend a helping hand. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank the government for the intention to build an airport terminal during this fiscal year, as announced by the Prime Minister when he opened the U.S. facilities in Inagua. So Inagua is on the verge of getting a new terminal building, a new high school during this fiscal year, and I'm excited about that. I'm also, Mr. Speaker, excited about the possibility that the Maguana Airport, under construction as I speak to you, will be opened in August, I understand. And Bahamas Air will resume flight to Maguana. I spoke about that several times in this place, and I'm so happy that the people of Maguana would soon get some relief. I can also say, by way of repetition, that lights are temporarily already installed at the Maguana Airport. I'm told they have to take them up in the day because of the construction that is ongoing, and they put back down at night just to ensure that if there is a need for its use, the lights will be available. Mr. Speaker, Lone Key, that's a small island in the southeastern Bahamas. I know most of my colleagues may not even know where Lone Key is, but I want to ask them, visit Lone Key before you leave this place. Because Lone Key is one of the most beautiful little islands anywhere on God's heaven, on God's earth. The beaches are long, clean, pristine, and Lone Key, I'm told Dr. Darville, the member for Pine Ridge, is doing a small development there soon, and I'm excited about that. And then I heard one Mr. Patterson has an application before the government now for a resort development in Lone Key. That speaks well to the future, because if Lone Key has any development, Crooked Island will benefit. Acklands would benefit, because they are just miles away from that beautiful Lone Key site. Mr. Speaker, I've just recapped some of the things that I hope to happen in my constituency over the next few months, and I want to thank the government in advance for what it has promised to do. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me just say a couple of things nationally before I speak to my ministry's portfolio. Mr. Speaker, crime is a problem, and it is becoming a little of great concern because, you know, Mr. Speaker, crime affects everybody. I know that during the campaign, crime was a subject that perhaps garnered some support from the public to various parties who were talking about it. And that tells me that everybody is concerned about crime. And I just want to say crime is not a widespread problem in this country. There are pockets in New Providence, like the Nassau Village area, the Carmichael Road area, and one or two other areas where I consider pockets of criminal activities. And I'm hoping that those who have bad children, and you know, Mr. Speaker, nobody's children is bad, even when they get in trouble, my good son. You hear the words coming from particularly mothers. But you know, I want to encourage mothers to be honest with their children. Take disciplinary actions when you must. Because you see, Mr. Speaker, if you do not discipline your children today, they will embarrass you tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, I have 5 children. The last one is 19. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, I have never had a call, not even a call from the school, to come and talk to your child. That's not miraculous. It's because they know I expect them to behave at school as they do at home. Because I don't intend to spare the rod. I don't pander. I do what I need to do. And because of that, Mr. Speaker, they've all turned out to be good children. And I'm proud of them. And they know that. They are accomplished. And every parent, every family could do the same thing. And if every family takes care of his or her family, this country will be a better country. But there are some parents, I suspect, who don't know where their children are when night falls. And sometimes it seems that they don't care. Like the children running the show. I went on a bus stop the other day just to talk to somebody who was sitting. And you know, this little child, no more than 9. I guarantee you, she couldn't be more than 9. And the mother was saying, sit down, sit down. Don't tell me to sit down. I feel like sitting down. Now, you know, those kind of things. When I was a boy, I know I couldn't say that to my mama. I don't care how drunk I get. There's no way I could say that. Because my teeth would have been everywhere in my stomach. She wouldn't just have it. But the parent laughed as if it's okay. It's not okay. And you know, it has to start at home. And so, Mr. Speaker, crime, I hope, will certainly continue its downward trend. And all of us, situation, wherever it raises its ugly head.
Member for Michael.
Yes, Mr.
I've been advised that we are again experiencing technical difficulties with the reception on television. And I'm going to ask for another 5-minute recess until we sort this matter out once and for all. Mr. Sergeant, suspend the House 5 minutes.
All right.
contribution, and of course spoken to by the Minister of Health, member for North Andros. Mr. Speaker, health care for our people is not a luxury. And, Mr. Speaker, I believe without insurance, many things that could be done to assist the sick may not be done because physicians normally require money for the services they render. And if you are not able to pay, chances are, in some cases, you may not get the required services just because doctors do not generally work for free. And the health care initiative, the health insurance program, as foreshadowed by the Prime Minister and this government, is certainly going to be a breakthrough for a lot of people who otherwise would be unable to afford the standard of health care that is afforded the rich and those who are able to afford it. And I heard a slang which is being used now. The health care provision would be from the cradle to the grave. Now that suggests to me from the time you were born until you die. And that to me, Mr. Speaker, is much better than any insurance which you might be able to buy right now. Because you know, Mr. Speaker, at age 80 or 75, no matter how good your insurance company had been to you, when you get 80, they drop you like a hot potato. They don't want your coverage no more. How much is it? Oh, I was very giving them something. Well, I'm told it's even younger than that. No, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian lifespan is lengthening. And those who lived 60 years ago are now expected in the same kind of trace to live 85, 90. I heard of a Japanese who lived 116 or 17 years this morning. The oldest man. And so, Mr. Speaker, I say that not to say that our lives would be that long, but I guarantee you many of us will live to see 80 plus. And it seemed to me that's really when you need insurance. Because you weaker, you prone to more illnesses, and then they drop you, having been insured for years, as if you made no contribution to them, and in most cases, Mr. Speaker, you even never claimed. But time up for you, bro. You go, and they take on a new generation, and that's not good. So I'm hoping the National Health Insurance Program would cure that. It's not going to help those who've already been the victim of no money and no insurance, but going forward, and that's again what the PLP is doing for the Bahamian people. See, Mr. Speaker, the former administration, they have a bad record. Every socio-economic plan that ever came to the Bahamian people generally came at the hands of the PLP. And that's why when they talk, I listen and laugh, even not in their face maybe, but I laugh because they got nothing to brag about. They have been building on the legacy of people like Sir Lyndon and not Sir Arthur, Arthur Hanna, Milo Butler, and those men. That's where we all now stand and on their shoulders. But I say that to say, if you look at it, any reasonable observer will have to conclude that the PLP is that party of choice that brought relief in almost every sphere of life to the Bahamian people. Every sphere of life. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm so glad that I'm a part of that great party. And I won't change it unless I see a need to do so, and I don't see the need in the foreseeable future. Yeah, no. you know, I don't want to say it any other way, because, you know, life has a way of changing. But, Mr. Speaker, the philosophical position of the PLP is in my heart and in my spirit. I just love what they do. Make some mistakes, yes, but always seeking to wipe every tear from every eye. That's what we do best. And that's what we will continue to do, led by the Right Honorable Member for Centerville in the person of Perry Gladstone Christie. Mr. Speaker, job creation and securing the future is the theme of this year's budget. And securing the future, we will. You know why, Mr. Speaker? Again, I go back to the leadership of the member for Centerville. When we left office, when the elections of 2007 came and the results were known, we were not in office anymore. But you know, Mr. Speaker, we had this country economically jumping. Just about every island had some development going on. And Mr. Speaker, I talk about development. The I Group in Maguana was brought to this country by the Right Honorable Leader for Centerville. And you know, Mr. Speaker, the F&M came along in 2007. It stopped for 5 years, just about. When we left in 2007, they had 87 people employed. And the work was going and going well. They stopped for 5 years. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm told they have about 7 or 9 people working with the I Group. I'm not talking about the airport construction now. I'm talking about the company itself. And so, Mr. Speaker, whenever a company has to stop business or progress for 5 years, it's hard for them to start up again, because all their finances may have left them. And I'm not talking of a factual position. I'm just saying, and then the government did not see fit to sign an agreement with them until just before the last election. Just before. Just before. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to even talk about that. I don't want to even talk about that. They gave them almost 5,000 acres of land and said, take it, we want nothing to do with it, develop it, and go. When we had the agreement with them, it was a 50-50 deal. You put the money, we put the land. And we share the profits. The government gets 50% of everything that was profit. That made sense. But you gave them 5,000 acres, tell them go. What do the Bahamian people get out of the deal? And you know, that's a bad deal. And of course, I'm still looking forward to the development in Maguana, and the I Group know I support what they do. But I'm saying I'm blaming the F&M administration for the bad deal, not the I Group, because they're happy all the way to the bank. But the F&M administration ought to hang their heads in shame for what they did to the deal that was made by the PLP government in that regard. Mr. Speaker, let me just say finally that there is no way that we will be able to create all the jobs that are required in a short time. And I know Bahamians are getting impatient because they want a job right now. And I understand that. I don't think there's any well-meaning politician who will not understand. A fellow who ain't got no work to do, he wants a job now. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, and sometimes it's good to be honest with our people, it just cannot all happen right now. We've hired quite a few people over the last couple of months. I am told it's probably very close to 3,000 people, government nationwide. That's a good start. But I know in the next year or two, this country will be bouncing from economic activities. That's my hope. That's the way I see it. And a lot more people will be brought on to the employment scene. And I look forward to that. But we beg the patience of our people while we understand what's happening with them, those who have no work. We just ask you to understand the government is literally not very financed, and we can only do what we can with what we have. And so we beg your patience in that regard. Now, Mr. Speaker, I will turn to the budget. Mr. Speaker, if bad financial management was a crime, the F&M would be in jail. They would have had to go in jail if bad management was a crime. Unfortunately, I have read the law books. It's not a crime. And so all they would have done was to mess up the finances of our country and leave it for somebody else to fix. And I know the former member for North Abaco knew exactly what he was doing. And I am thinking the way I thought he thought. If I mess it up and I don't come back, it'll be somebody else's problem. If I mess it up and I come back, I will do my best to fix it. I think that's his formula. Because he was spending what we do not have like a man gone crazy. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I said before, there is no way a country, a person could spend what they do not have unless they live on overdraft. Because whenever you spend what you do not have, you're living in the hands of the finance man. And the F&M and these members opposite have the gall, the unmitigated gall, to say to this country that we borrowed $1 billion in 1 year. Now, Mr. Speaker, that came from no less a person than the leader of the opposition, the member for Kalani. Now, Mr. Speaker, I expect mathematically that as a medical doctor, he knows better. Because if anybody over there could count, I believe he could count. Now, Mr. Speaker, why I say that? Mr. Speaker, when we came to office last year, we met bills amounting to over $100 million. Just bills. Just bills. And then, you know, Mr. Speaker, to finance the government that they left in place, we had to borrow $400+ million. That amounted to about $500 million. That's the way it went. That was the first order of business. Because the revenue, Mr. Speaker, does not match the expenditure, after 1 year, we have to borrow again to keep the government financed. Now, to say we borrow $1 billion in 1 year has to be a lie. Mathematically so, politically so, it's not true. Mr. Speaker, I know you say lie.
I prefer to use another word.
Not true. It's not true. And anybody who says it on that side is a stranger to the truth. Because, you know, Mr. Speaker, even if, and I am admitting that the government will need to borrow $465 million. But if we borrow it now, that is to finance the government for the coming year. So to say we borrow $1 billion in 1 year is not true. Now, if I'm wrong, I challenge anybody there to stand up. And the church say amen, because you ain't got the truthfulness to stand up. You can't change the truth. It's stubborn. Very stubborn. And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, we will have to borrow, but it's for the year 2013, 2014. That's what the borrowing is about. I'm talking about the other approximately $465 million. And so I want them to correct it, but I know they won't. So I move on. Mr. Speaker, we need to remember that the country needs money on which to operate, because the Bahamian people expect services, and rightly so. But you know, Mr. Speaker, a lot of people, including some in this place, do not pay their fair share of taxes on a timely basis. And I don't say that because of what I believe. I say that because of what I know. And it has to start with us. It is difficult for us to tell the average Bahamian to pay your tax when there are people in this very place who are guilty. That's not right. That's not right. And so, Mr. Speaker, I believe that if we are going to expect services, we all as Bahamians, to the extent that we are able, ought to pay our fair share. That's the way I see it. And Mr. Speaker, this budget is designed to create employment because the Prime Minister has allotted $10 million for small home repairs. I know that's going to affect several dozen contractors and other handymen who can do small repairs. $10 million. So we're looking for hundreds of jobs to be created by that.
No.
I'm sorry. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm also happy that the government has put in the budget $10 million to build sporting complexes throughout the Bahamas. And whenever our complex is being built in Abaco, you can expect for dozens of men and women to be employed locally. So wherever these complexes are built, there will be generated some employment just by that initiative. Mr. Speaker, the $1 million that was put in the budget for Mardi Gras, that's going to be another small area of employment for those who are involved in costume making and junkanoo and all that stuff. That is another little source of employment. But you know, Mr. Speaker, the main engine that will drive the employment in our country is in my ministerial boat. Yeah. And that is agriculture. Yeah. Agriculture. Agriculture. Yeah. And you know, Mr. Speaker, a lot of people think agriculture is basically looking at corn in the field. Agriculture is from the growing of food to the table. All along that food chain is called agriculture. So from the day you put the seed in the ground to the minute you put the spoon to your mouth, all along that chain is considered agriculture. So it has several components. And Mr. Speaker, before I speak to the essence of what the agricultural department of my ministry is doing, let me hail the Prime Minister, member for Centerville, for his wisdom and foresight. Mr. Speaker, agriculture in our country will never again after this year be the same. You know why, Mr. Speaker? Several reasons. Not the least amongst which is the fact that the Prime Minister has put in this budget some $4 million for the continued construction of the Agriculture Marine School in North Andros to be attached to the University or College of the Bahamas. Yeah. So it's not going to be out there on its own. And Mr. Speaker, that to me will be transformational. Because when you build a school around agriculture, employment is generated in North Andros. I know North Andros MP must be laughing all the way to the bank. You got a higher staff, They're going to build dormitories for men and women. They're going to have plots of land allotted for experimental farming and commercial farm too, Mr. Speaker. We had a presentation to Cabinet the day before yesterday, I think it was. And Mr. Speaker, when you hear, was it yesterday morning? My fee is longer than that. Mr. Speaker, when you would have heard Dr. Thomas, I think his name was, spoke to what this school means to the Bahamas, I have goose pimples. I feel some now, of course. They're a little less now. But, Mr. Speaker, it was such a good presentation, full of hope. And, Mr. Speaker, I am so glad that Alfred Virginius Cornelius Gray is at the helm of agriculture at this time. I'm glad for that. Because, Mr. Speaker, I am going to work hard to ensure that the responsibilities given to me by the Prime Minister is carried out to the best of my ability. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank everybody in my ministry right there, from the permanent secretary to the janitress, and all in between, for doing what I consider to be a yeoman's task, because no minister could be successful on his own. He needs the support of all the administrative and technical staff if his portfolio's responsibility is to be successful. And I want to thank them. Lest I miss and forget it, I put that right there. I thank them all. And you know, Mr. Speaker, going back to the Marine and Agricultural School, Mr. Speaker, there is plan to ensure that those who work on those experimental farms as students are given at least an associate's degree in agriculture for the studies which they will pursue. And it will be tied to the University of the Bahamas. And, Mr. Speaker, from there they could go on to do whatever their lifelong wish in agriculture will be, supported by a government. To the University of the Bahamas. Indeed. There's no question about that. You understand, Mr. Speaker? And so, Mr. Speaker, I am happy for the people of the Bahamas. I'm happy for the people of North Andros, because a city will be built around this school. A city will be built around this school over time. And I may not live to see it, but there will be hundreds, yea, thousands of people who will move to Andros either to go to school or to work there because of this farm. And, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Thomas, Dr. Thomas told us that in 5 years, this school will be making a profit, if it is run the way he has envisioned it to run, of $23 million per annum. Profit. Profit. So it's not going to be a drain on the public purse, because the government intends to market, sell, and in other words, Mr. Speaker, it's going to be a semi-commercial venture, so that the school will be able to take care of itself. And that must also be part of the Prime Minister's legacy. And what a legacy. What a legacy, Mr. Speaker, because we've been talking about agriculture in this country for years. And this is the first time any government has made an attempt to create. And let them say we're dreaming. Let them say Long Island said we were dreaming. Well, Mr. Speaker, Martin Luther too had a dream.
50 years ago.
And that was almost 50 years ago. And you know, one of his dreams was that one day black men and white men will live together as brothers and sisters. And it's coming to pass. Not by the color of their skin, but by the contents of their character. I had a dream. That's what the dream is about, Mr. Speaker. And you know, I saw an ad with three men on it. I think 3 men. The president, Mr. Obama, Dr. Martin Luther King, and one other person. But you know, it says J.F. Kennedy. Above it, I have a dream. And then Mr. Obama came back and said, I am the dream. What a powerful message. Martin Luther King dreamt it. President Obama is that dream. A black president in a predominantly white country. That's what this is about. And you know, one of the things that we have to admit is that all men are created equal. All men. And all means all. It means white men as well as black men. It means Jews as well as Gentiles. It means Catholic as well as Protestants. It means all men. And that's why I have no prejudices. And I don't like people who have prejudices. Because God made us all equal. And that's why I love the member for for South Abaco, and I know he knows that. I keep saying it. Because I knew him for more than 30, 40 years. I consider him to be a white man. I consider to be myself a black, proud man. Proud to be black. But he has never shown an inch, an iota of prejudice. When I am sure prejudices were ripe in this country. He continued to maintain that we are one. And he has certainly stood out as one of those persons who when it was not fashionable, for the white man to be aligned with the black man, he stood side by side with Sir Lyndon. And I know he was criticized. I know if he wanted to tell you the truth, he will tell you that. But look at our country now. It's better because black and white, and you know, Mr. Speaker, black and white equal gray. No pun intended, Mr. Speaker, no pun intended. No pun intended there. But the truth is, when you mix black and white, you get gray. Yes, sir. And that's me. I go on, Mr. Speaker.
Black and white.
Yes.
Great.
Mr. Speaker, my ministry had been given $51.8 million to spend during the next fiscal year. And Mr. Speaker, we intend to be frugal, we intend to be prudent, and ensure wherever expenditure could be curtailed, we will do so. And wherever we can raise revenue for the government, we intend to do so. Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that there is a concern in my ministry, particularly at GRAC, at the Gladstone Road Agricultural Center. Mr. Speaker, teething is going on. I've lost a lot of animals over the last several weeks. We have lost sheep, goats, pigs. I mean, they just take them. And we have security on duty. Full security on duty. So I know there is some teething going on. But you know, Mr. Speaker, over the last couple of hours, I made an emergency decision. I don't know if you can make emergency decision, but I made an emergency decision. I have had to hire a security firm to do security at GRAC, effective immediately, because the pilferage, the teething cannot continue. And I'd rather pay $6,000 a month for a security firm who would be responsible to me and my ministry than to have hired hands. And when you ask, what happened to the pigs? We don't know. We don't know. How could you be on duty and don't know?
Who stole my car?
And you know, pigs don't go quietly. They make noise if you catch them.
Who stole my pigs?
My God, even if you're in the area, you can hear the pigs making noise. My God, Mr. Speaker, I can't go on like that. So I made an emergency decision. I've also made a decision, Mr. Speaker, to clean around the entire perimeter of GRAC, putting a 15-foot path straight around the perimeter. So if it is not local thieving, and the thieves come from elsewhere, the security officer should see them crossing that line. Mr. Speaker, this is going to be tough out there. I'm going to make sure that somebody account to the ministry for what's going on there. Mr. Speaker, not only are they thieving the animals, they're thieving the feed from the feed mill. They thieve the fan out the buildings. I'm telling you, they thieve the water pump. Every time you put a water pump down tonight, tomorrow the water pump gone. And you have security on duty. Mr. Speaker, if I were to ask you, see, even a donkey will kick you if you tell them somebody ain't over that. And you know donkeys supposed to be very stupid. They're very stupid. But even a donkey will tell you something wrong with that picture. So, Mr. Speaker, I have to admit that GRAC, where we have the breeding grounds for animals and the insemination program, the propagation program where we grow small plants and all those things, we've got to keep that program going because that is the bedrock of the Ministry of Agriculture. And if we can't succeed in that area, generally we are failing. Because when people want to see how to do this or how to grow that, we send them to GRAC. Because that's where the propagation unit is. That's where the feed for the animal. Mr. Speaker, you buy 1,000 bags of animal feed. And by the time you seek to sell it, half gone. Mr. Speaker, I don't like saying this publicly, but it's about time I do. And I'm going to put some cameras too. I shouldn't say that piece. Yeah, that's true. But you know, Mr. Speaker, God has helped thieves, but he's helped watchman too. God helped thieves, but he does help watchman too. And someday soon we're going to have somebody in the hands of the police for either complicity, when I say that, conspiring with those who may not work there to deprive the government of all the work it's put in to raise these animals, protect them. And Mr. Speaker, it's not right. It is just not right. Now, Mr. Speaker, talking about GRAC, every building in GRAC right now is under contract for repairs. Mr. Speaker, the former government allowed those buildings to deteriorate to the point where every one of those buildings are in need of repairs. And I had to approve contracts, about 4 or 5 over the last few days, for the complete renovation of those buildings and offices in the Gladstone Road area. So in the next several weeks, we will have brand new buildings, so to speak, at GRAC, and it should improve the morale of our people there while we seek to make... See, if the government can't take care of its things, it's hard to tell people you got to paint up your house when you keep in bad house. And so, Mr. Speaker, even in addition to that, if you go on Portersky Dock right now, you will see that every building under my watch, belonging to the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Local Government has been repaired and painted over the last 2-3 weeks. Every one. The fisheries complex on East Bay Street, they used to see it yellowish, blue and white. See, I believe, Mr. Speaker, if you are going to do anything to enhance where people work, there's got to be something that you could do to make a difference. And so all of those buildings, the 5 buildings, Portisky and on East Bay Street, have all been repaired and painted over the last couple of weeks. I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, those things to say that the former administration paid no attention to the plants, to the buildings that belong to this government. They allowed them to go into disrepair. If you listen to the member for Yamacraw and watch those pictures on TV, you'll have to put your hand on your head and holler to see how the former Minister of Social Services and member for Long Island, she didn't hear the member's speech because she ducked out. But she is here now. And I have to say, when you look at those pictures of what she left behind and see what the member for Yamacraw and her team have been able to do with those buildings, it's almost miraculous.
Member Michael,
I'll be glad to yield to see if she got anything to say.
Member Michael, yield. The chair recognizes the member for Long Island.
I do
point of
stand
order.
on a point of order. And the honorable member for Michael does not know where I was. I did not duck being here. I have issues that, you know, are also important. And please, I would rather you not go there.
Very well.
But Mr. Speaker, on the point that he mentioned, I would like to just take the House back to the year 2007. The same work that is being done at the boys' school, I said it in here before, is very similar work that we had to undertake at the girls' school, where we had a fire under the watch of the then minister who now sits in that seat, where we lost the life of one resident at the girls' school, and 2 lives, I'm sorry, and irreparable damage done to the lives of others. And we did the same sort of upgrades that they are now undertaking at the Simpson Pen. And because, Mr. Speaker, of the nature of the residents that we have there, and because they, under their first watch, had created just regular cottages, this is why we had so much damage done by the residents. The industrial products that are now being installed at the boys' school are the same products that we had already started to look at for the upgrade. So we're happy they've carried those out. So I would like to have the member for Michael know what the correct story is, but I will deal with it at heads to head. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, honourable member. Member for Michael. Member for Yamacraw stands on a...
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order. Mr. Speaker, you know, the member really didn't have to go there. I understand her embarrassment, the member's embarrassment over the conditions that they left at those places, but no such work was carried out at Villa May Pratt. And along the lines of what is being done now at Simpson Pen, no such work was carried out. And so, unless the member could prove it, and I know it has never been done, in addition to which those cottages that were placed at Villa May Pratt and Simpson Pen were done under the F&M administration. They were not done under the PRP's administration, Mr. Speaker. And the records will reflect that. Those cottages were put there under the former F&M administration. And they were made along the lines of residences. So all of the fixtures, everything were just domestic equipment. It is only now that we are moving to put in place the institutional equipment that is needed, and that is what you see in the photos, and that is what is happening. And stay tuned. We're not even finished yet.
Thank you, honourable member. But the chair is not going to allow it back and forth, but allow you the response. Member for Long Island.
Mr. Speaker, for clarification of persons in this House and outside of this House, Michael has brought it up. I would have dealt with it later. We put the institutional furniture into the boys' school in the dining room of which the member is now speaking. So she is inaccurate to say it did not happen. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, I will remind this honorable House that the entire quadrangle of the girls' school was burnt out beyond usage when we took office in 2007. It had been condemned, it was not being used, and we lost the lives of several of the residents there. And so, Mr. Speaker, the reality is we know that in terms of what is going on at those schools, it is an ongoing undertaking. And I thank you very much.
Very well. Member for Yamakro.
It is total inaccuracy. In fact, you know, I would really like to use that other word, but it is totally untrue, Mr. Speaker, to say that the whole quadrangle, there was one room, Mr. Speaker, one room was burnt. One room was burnt. Mr. Speaker, I understand. I totally understand how the member feels. I totally understand how the member feels, but the record speaks for itself. Mr. Speaker, I did not like to use the quadrangle because I believe it put the young people in a position as though they were in a jail. And that is why I didn't use it. I felt the cottages were better suited for the young ladies because Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I totally understand how the member feels today.
Thank you.
Completely ashamed, completely embarrassed.
Thank you.
I know, Mr. Speaker, I don't have to feel ashamed. I feel sad for what happened with those young women.
Thank you, member. I'd like you to yield at this time.
Yes, I'm saying that I feel sorry about what happened with those young girls, but that certainly was not my fault because those things happened. But the member had it within her power. The member, Mr. Speaker, had it within her power, her and her government, to improve the quality of life for those young men in that institution.
Thank you.
And they did nothing about it.
Thank you, member. Member for Michael, the member yields. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bain and Grandstand.
This would be an appropriate time for us to suspend. So I move the suspension of the House until 3 p.m. on Wednesday, the 12th of June.
Thank you, honorable members. It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many in favor will remain seated and those opposed will stand. The business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
All right.
That ends this morning's session here at the House of Assembly. That last exchange there you heard between the member for Yamacraw and the member for Long Island, the subject really of the member for Yamacraw's presentation this morning. She was talking about all that's being done with the Willie Mae Pratt School for Girls and, of course, the Simpson Penn Center, the amount of money that the government is expending to repair that institution. And, of course, the member for Michael, who is on the floor and will conclude his presentation when members return at 3 o'clock this afternoon, insisting that agriculture will be the engine and part of the legacy of the Prime Minister. As he says, never before has the kind of attention been paid to agriculture as is being done now. Of course, the linchpin of all of these efforts is the $4 million that's been allocated to the Agricultural and Marine School in North Andros, planned for North Andros. As he says, Dr. Thomas, the consultant who's advising the government about that school on North Andros, says if it's run properly, $23 million in profit within 5 years. And so we'll hear some more from the member for Michael when we return to the House at 3 o'clock this afternoon on the 2013-2014 budget debate. And so on behalf of the team here at the Parliamentary Channel, I'm Anthony Newbold. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.